Hello everyone and welcome to another video. This time we're going to be looking at the role of Air Raid Wardens, obviously the role that they played in the war. And these came under the umbrella of the Air Raid Precautions, and this refers to a number of organisations and guidelines in the United Kingdom dedicated to the protection of civilians from the danger of air raids. Government consideration for air raid precautions increased in the 1920s and 30s, with the Raid Wardens service set up in 1937 to report on bombing incidents. Every local council was responsible for organising air raid precaution. Wardens, messengers, ambulance drivers, rescue parties and liaison with police and fire brigades. From the 1st of September 1939, Air Raid Precaution Wardens enforced a blackout. Heavy curtains and shutters were required on all private residences, commercial premises and factories to prevent light escaping and so making them a possible marker for enemy bombers to locate their targets. With increased enemy bombing during the Blitz, the Air Raid Protection Services were central in reporting and dealing with bombing incidents. They managed the air raid sirens and ensured people were directed to shelters. Women were involved in ARP services through the Women's Voluntary Service. The Auxiliary Fire Service was set up in 1938 to support existing local fire services, which were amalgamated into a National Fire Service in 1941. From 1941, the Air Raid Protection Service officially changed its title to Civil Defence Service to reflect the wider range of roles it then encompassed. During the war, almost 7,000 civilian defence workers were killed. In all, some 1.5 million men and women served within the organisation during World War II. Over 127,000 full-time personnel were involved at the height of the Blitz, but by the end of 1943 this had dropped to 70,000. The Civil Defence Service was stood down towards the end of the war in Europe on the 2nd of May 1945. Between 1949 and 1968, many of the duties of the Civil Defence Service were resurrected through the Civil Defence Corps. So in regards to the Air Raid Protection Wardens, they ensured that the blackout was observed, sounded air raid sirens, safely guided people into public air raid shelters, issued and checked gas masks, evacuated areas around unexploded bombs, rescued people where possible from bomb-damaged properties, located temporary accommodation for those who had been bombed out, and reported to their control centre about incidents, fires, etc. And also they called in other services as required, quite a responsible role. Report and Control was the central headquarters that received information from wardens and messengers and managed the delivery of the relevant services needed to deal with each incident. Messengers, who were often Boy Scouts or the Boys Brigade members aged between 14 and 18 as messengers or runners, would take verbal or written messages for Air Raid Wardens and deliver them to either the sector post or the control centre. Bombing would sometimes cut telephone lines, and messengers performed an important role in giving the Air Raid Protection Services a fuller picture of events. First aid parties were trained to give first response first aid to those injured in bombing incidents. First aid parties would provide initial treatment on the scene and could call upon doctors and nurses to provide enhanced care. Ambulance drivers would deal with casualties from bombing, obviously, and were taken to first aid posts or hospital by volunteer drivers. The rescue services were involved in getting the dead and injured out of bombed premises. Fire guards were formed after the destruction caused by the bombing of the City of London in late December 1940. All buildings in certain areas had to have a 24-hour watch kept. In the event of fire, these fire watchers would call on the rescue services and ensure that they could access the building to deal with incidents. Now, looking into more detail in regards to the Air Raid Warden equipment that they were issued, obviously the first one was a steel helmet, and Air Raid Wardens were issued with these steel helmets, and they were similar to the steel helmets issued to soldiers in the First World War and protected the wearer from falling shrapnel and debris. Steel helmets were also used to issued to firefighters, police officers and other members of the civil defence services, and soon became a recognisable symbol of authority. From 1938, in response to fears of air attacks on Britain might include the use of poison gas, the entire British population was issued with gas masks. Most people received a standard civilian pattern respirator. Air Raid Wardens, by contrast, received a higher grade of respirator. This is a civilian duty respirator. Unlike the standard civilian model, it features separate glass eyepieces, an exhalation valve, and could be adapted to accept a microphone. Although poison gas was never used against Britain during the Second World War, masks like this became another common symbol of wartime life. Though masks were potentially life-saving pieces of equipment, they tended to make their wearers appear terrifyingly alien and dehumanised. The Wardens were also issued with Wardens overalls, and they were made of heavy cotton and come with several roomy pockets. Sturdy overalls like this made it easier for Wardens to move around bomb sites, for example when checking for casualties or putting out fire bombs. They were also issued with a ceiling pike. It was over 3 metres long and was used by Air Raid Wardens when exploring bomb-damaged buildings. Wardens could use the point to give potentially unsafe ceilings a testing poke, while the bill hook could be used to snag and dislodge debris. The next piece of equipment is something called a gas rattle, and this was a handheld noise-making device used to give warning of a gas attack or during a gas mask drill. By holding the rattle and spinning the rattle around it, the rattle makes a distinctive clicking noise. The all clear signal could be given by ringing a handbell. This particular example was used by staff in the Imperial War Museum, which was closed to the public during the Second World War, and its buildings used for war purposes. Rattles like this used to be common sight in the hands of supporters of football matches. Air Raid Wardens were the first link to the chain of Britain's civil defence system. Wardens worked from a network of Wardens posts, which were connected to higher command by telephone or messenger. When bombing raids occurred, Wardens on duty had to monitor and report bomb damage. This form sets out how these reports were to be made. Accurate information like this could be vital for saving lives and protecting important buildings from damage. They were also issued with first aid kits. This is a triangular bandage supplied by the St John Ambulance Association. It is part of a first aid kit that belonged to Walter Lee, an Air Raid Warden from Grantham. It is printed with diagrams showing various ways a triangular bandage can be used. Air Raid Wardens were trained in first aid. They were often first on the scene of bomb damage and might be called on to treat the injured until first aid parties or ambulance services arrived. The other piece of equipment was a stirrup pump and hose, and this was used for small fires. It could be used by 2 people, one working the pump, which stands in a bucket of water, and a second holding the hose and nozzle to point a jet of water onto the fire. During a blitz, incendiary fire-starting bombs were used in large numbers. I'm going to try and pronounce it again. A warden might be the first person to respond to the incendiary attack and could use a pump like this to fight the fire. Wardens would also train others in the use of stirrup pumps like these. And that concludes our video on the role of fire wardens. I do hope you've enjoyed it, something different for the channel and also something I'm interested in. Obviously the war, old buildings, etc. And I really do appreciate what they did for us during the war. Anyway, thank you very much for listening to this video. If you do like it, please like, share and subscribe. Tell your friends and family. And till the next video, take care of yourselves and goodbye for now.